Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear listener, to Kardec Radio. Today, the show is about Transcending the Titanic. And this is not about making Kardec Radio a sensationalist program. No, we're talking about events of everyday life. We're talking about 100 years of the very event, April 14th to the 15th of 1912. The Titanic, almost like the unbeatable Titanic, actually got to sink. And it sunk totally at 2 a.m. on April 15th, 1912. More than 1,500 people drowned on that very fatidic day. And why? Why do we care? We care because it's about a lesson for all of us. And we are going to have here one of the experts in the field that actually wrote a book entitled Transcending the Titanic, Michael Team. Michael Team is a retired insurance company claims manager and semi-retired journalist living in Kailua, Hawaii. He is the author of 5 books, 1 on distance running and 4 dealing with spiritual matters, including life after death. The 2 most recent being Transcending the Titanic and The Afterlife Explorers. He is a regular contributor to Atlantis Rising magazine and 2 national athletic magazines. He is the editor of the Journal of Spirituality and Paranormal Studies and the Searchlight. Mike serves as vice president of the Academy of Spirit and Consciousness Studies and writes a twice-monthly blog on spirituality at whitecrowsbooks.com. We have a lot to learn from him, and we are going to be honored to bring him to the show in half an hour because he is 6 hours away from Eastern Standard Time. He's actually in Hawaii, and it's going to be 5:30 in the morning there for him. So, and he's very kind to be with us that early in the morning to share with all of us at Kardec Radio much that he has investigated, reporting afterlife dialogues of survivors in the beyond, of course, of the Titanic. We're going to get to know more, and he's also reporting about Kardec. In his latest book, he talks much about Kardec and the contributions of the Spiritist view on mediumship, etc. So we have a lot to learn, and we are very honored to have him here with us today. And, Kardec himself talked about fear of death. In the Spirit's book, question 941, he asks this very question, which is, the worry over death is highly vexing to many people. Why such worry if they have the whole future in front of them? And the illuminated minds replied to this question in this way. It is wrong to have such apprehension, but what do you expect? Since early on, people have been persuaded that there is a hell and a heaven, and that they will most likely go to hell because they have been taught that whatever belongs to the realm of nature is a mortal sin for the soul. Thus, when they grow up, and if they have any reason at all, they can no longer accept such belief and become atheists or materialists. It is thus that they are led to believe that nothing exists beyond the present life. As for those who persist in their childhood belief, they fear the eternal fire that must burn them without destroying them. But death does not inspire any fear in the righteous, for faith gives them certainty about the future. Hope beacons them with a better life, and since they have practiced the law of charity, they have the assurance that in the world into which they will enter, they will not find anyone in whose eyes they will dread to look. Yes, it's pretty much in the lines of the very first chapter of Michael Team, when he quotes Lawrence Bisley, a Titanic survivor, I think we all learned many things that night about the boogie called fear and how the facing of it is much less than the dread of it. This is pretty much towards the lines of what the spirits brought to us in 1857 through the mediums at Kardec's time. Dear listener, it's very important, as Joanna De Angelis said in an event at the Spirit Society of Baltimore in 2007 by the launching of the book, The New Generation. Joanna De Angelis to Divaldo Franco mentioned that it's very important that we think of death in a daily basis, at least once, not in a morbid way, but in a very realistic way, because it's going to come sooner or later. And we need to talk to our loved ones about it, saying, the day I die, I would like you to proceed in this or that way, and I would like you to stay this or that way as well, etc., etc. We need to talk about these things in a very natural way, because when we hesitate, people suffer, and we suffer as well, because it's going to happen, and sometimes when we least expect. So today we're going to talk about one of those very moments when we face death, and it may be very difficult for some, but for William T. Stead, he wasn't afraid at all. Why? He is one of the spirits who came back from the afterlife and reported what happened to him on the very night that the Titanic sank. We're going to hear from it and much more from the very words of one of the researchers in the field, our dear Michael Team. He's going to be here with us talking about it. Right now, we'd like to remind you that tomorrow, Sunday, June the 24th, at 9 a.m., it's going to be a whole day event in Trumbull, Connecticut. Hundreds of people have registered for the amazing event, the Family Spiritist Retreat, coordinated by Eduardo Guimarães and Naur Fonseca, and many other Spiritist centers. And it's going to be an event totally dedicated to the family, from babies to children, teenagers, young adults, and elderly ones are going to get together and experience lots of educational activities on Spiritism. And the theme of this year is No Solar, a Family Experience. I hope you're going to enjoy very much, and all you have to do is to go FamilySpiritistRetreat.org, get to know more about the event. Even if you haven't registered, go there, talk to them. I am sure they're gonna embrace you with all the love over there that they have in their hearts, and you're going to experience an unforgettable event. Also, in 2 weeks, Kardec Radio is celebrating its first anniversary, and we're so honored. It has been a beautiful journey this last year. So many collaborators, from Carlos Diaz to Kirsten de Mello, Daniel Santos, and many, many more, and especially our dear Selenia Shepherd. Would like to dedicate this very program of today to our dear Selenia Shepherd, beloved mother, sister, wife, and friend of all of us in Spiritism, a collaborator of Kardec Radio who crossed over to her spiritual home yesterday. We love her very much, and we dedicate this very program to her in much gratitude for her righteous attitude before life. And dear listener, in the opening of this program, it's all about love. It's all about the long-standing values of life, the unchangeable ones. Let us listen to this beautiful message brought in through the hands of Chico Xavier. It's entitled Wait and Love Always, and it is in the book and CD, Enlightening Messages, by the Spiritist Society of Baltimore. If you want to buy it, you just go ssbaltimore.org. At our bookstore, you can buy the CD, the book, and give it as a gift as well. Let us enjoy this as we kickstart our program today.
wait, and love always. Much affliction will be cut at the root if you learn how to smile in silence. Many grudges will be forgotten if you forgive the iniquity you implore for the peace of the Lord. But the Lord equally awaits your participation in the peace of others. Reflect on the needs of your brother before you criticize his thoughtless deeds. Oftentimes, the aggressiveness with which he hurts you is only his anguish, and the rude word which he uses to return your care is nothing but the wound in his heart poisoning his mouth. Aid 1,000 times before you disapprove only once. The swamp admits ailing currents, for it did not find hands to dry it out. And the desert brings on thirst and suffering, for it did not receive the morning dew. Allow mercy to develop into silent help in your heart, so that pain may fade away. Do not fuel the fire of evil with the dry log of irritation and hate. Wait and love always. In silence, the prune tree multiplies its own fruits, and the sky, overtaken by the nocturnal shadows, reveals the glory of the stars. Think of Christ, our silent friend. Without demands or self-acclaim, he wrote the immortal poems of forgiveness and love, hope and happiness in the heart of the earth. Let's make him our model in our daily struggles, and by tolerating and helping today in this short human existence, we will reap tomorrow the blessings of the silent light, which will show us the ways to eternal life.
Dear listener, isn't that beautiful? You can buy that CD and give it as a gift to your friends and family. And not only that, but you can keep it in your car as well, because, nowadays driving, commuting a lot, these messages really set a different tone. They calm and pacify our minds, prepare us for a transition that may happen at any time. Right now, as we're waiting to awake our dear Michael Teen, because he is 6 hours away from Eastern Standard Time, and he is so kind that he made himself available to be here with us at Kardec Radio Live. While we're waiting a little bit longer, you're going to enjoy the beautiful segments by Kirsten DeMello and Dr. Magalhães. Kirsten is going to keep reflecting about the moral laws and the importance of fulfilling them for our own happiness, whereas our dear Dr. Magalhães are going to be talking about the importance of keeping the natural resources and being eco-friendly in a spiritist view. I hope you enjoy this, and very soon we're going to have here with us Michael Teen talking about Transcending the Titanic, as this year we have the 100th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listeners, and welcome back to the Spiritist Moment. Today we'll be discussing again about the moral laws, recapping a little bit what we've discussed, and rejuvenating ourselves with learning more about the divine moral laws with questions 627 and 639. Dear friends, as always, we start out talking about the Spirit's book and understanding, and we urge you to go read and study all about the moral laws. It is quite interesting to us as we read in question 627 when the Spirits give us wonderful divine advice in terms of the moral/divine natural laws. And they say to us, quote, "Our mission is to strike the eyes and ears of all in order to confound pride. Let's stop there and reflect just a little bit with what they mean by that. Let's reflect what keeps us furthest from God and what teachings have the good and noble spirits shared with us in the Spirit's book, in the Gospel according to Spiritism. Pride and ego keeps us furthest from God. So when we read this text, we already know and we remember, we bring to our mind what the spirits have already instructed us through the codification. That pride is one of the vices that keeps us furthest from God. So when the spirits say to us that their mission is to strike the eyes and ears of all in order to confound pride, to call for us to reflect. That this further deepening of our pride, if we allow it to continue to grow, if we don't confound it, as the spirits say, if we don't work on it, this actually keeps us from accomplishing our goals. And what are our goals in this life and in all our lives? To learn and to comply and to practice the moral laws, to fulfill them. And we know that the spirits tell us in the Spirit's book that if we are able to comply, to follow, to read, study, and understand the moral laws, that is what brings us to our happiness. So doing the opposite of that will make us what? Not be as happy. Something for us to reflect on, dear friends, as we read and study the Spirit's book. And interestingly enough, this is a desire of a lot of our obsessors, whether incarnate or discarnate, is to make us unhappy. How do we do that? Pride, boosting the pride in us and our ego, and doing all that they can to keep us away from the moral laws. All the more reason for us to go and study all about it. So let's continue on with what the spirits say in this quote from question 627. And the spirits continue to say the following: and to unmask the hypocrisy of those who assume the outward appearance of virtue and of religion as a cloak for their turpitudes. Question for us to reflect, dear listeners. Are we capable of unmasking ourselves? What are the spirits talking about here? Well, unmasking, do we understand even what that means? Well, to be fully honest with ourselves and with others. It's called congruency. We could even make up a term such as spiritual congruency. Being congruent means what I say, what I think, and what I do all match up. It also means to be transparent. And are we doing this in the home and at work? Are we being the same person at home and at work, at our place of worship, or at our spiritual center and at home? Are we being the same person? Are we complying with the moral laws? Thoughts for us to reflect about as we study these questions in the Spirit's book, dear friends and listeners. We also urge you to read and study question 639, because question 639 is a call to responsibility for us and how we affect others in this life. When the spirits say to us, thus the man who has been led into evil by the position that his fellow creatures have made for him is less guilty than those who have caused him to go astray. It's a call for responsibility, dear friends, for what we do to ourselves, but also how we affect those around us. Let's reflect, dear friends, and let us not be discouraged, but be encouraged in our lives. And let us read a small quote from the book Memoirs of Father Germain, annotated and written down by Amalia Domingo Soler. In the beginning and the opening of the book, Father Germain says, and let us use this as a meditation for us. And we quote him: when life's deceptions overwhelm you, when doubt tortures your mind, go to the seashore, and if there is left one atom of sentiment within you, if the fibers of your soul are moved by the marvelous and spectacular scene there, sit in the sand, contemplate the waves with their mantles of clear foam, listen attentively and comprehend what the waves are saying with their eternal murmur, and you will see how unconsciously your thoughts will elevate, searching for the cause of such a grand effect. Father Germain. So, dear friends, go to your own internal seashore, your own meditative state to gain more strength through prayer when we go through these trying times. And as always, we recommend you to go, read, and study. And as always, we wish you many blessings.
Hello, dear Kardec Radio listener. Welcome to our segment, Spiritism in Your Life. In this week, we're going to be talking about our environment, our planet Earth, and how are we taking care of our natural resources. Especially because we're having during this week one of the most important meetings regarding our environment protection, which is called Rio Plus 20. A follow-up from a previous meeting in 1992, a recent report from the UNEP International Resource Panel mentioned that by 2050, human beings could devour an estimated 140 billion tons of minerals, ores, fossils, fuels, and biomass per year, 3 times the current consumption rate, unless economic growth is decoupled from natural resource use. And that makes us think, well, considering that the economic growth and the populational growth we're having nowadays is steadily going up, many people will start thinking that, well, the world's going to end or we have to find alternative resources. But also, other numbers are very interesting too. Currently developed countries' citizens consume an average of 16 tons of mineral ore, fossils, and biomass per capita, ranging up to 40 or more tons per person in some countries. By comparison, in developing countries, the average per capita consumption is around 4 tons per year, which means that in some countries, citizens are consuming about 10 times more natural resources than developing countries. Considering all those numbers, one word is going to come through our minds, which is sustainability. But sustainability means a lot of things, including increasing productivity, decreasing the waste, and start thinking about others. And how are we managing our natural resources as brothers living in one planet? In order to further discuss that topic, we're going to read a passage from the Gospel according to Spiritism that discusses this topic in detail. On chapter 25, item 8, the earth will produce enough to feed all its inhabitants when, according to the laws of justice, charity, and love for one's neighbor, people know how to manage the provisions it gives to them. When fraternity reigns among all peoples, as it does among the provinces of the same country, the temporary surplus of one will make up for the temporary insufficiency of another, and each will have what he needs. The rich will then regard themselves as those who possess a large amount of seed. If they scatter it, it will produce 100-fold for themselves and for others. But if they consume the seed by themselves, if they waste it, and allow the surplus of what they have consumed to be lost, the seed will produce nothing, and there will not be enough for everybody. If they hoard it into their barns, the worms will devour it. That is why Jesus said, "Do not accumulate treasures on the earth, which are perishable, but create treasures in heaven, because they are eternal." In other words, do not attach more importance to material possessions than spiritual ones, and know how to sacrifice the former on behalf of the later. In this beautiful passage by Allan Kardec in the Gospel according to Spiritism, it makes it very clear for us that Earth will produce enough to support us as long as we do our part. But in order to achieve that, we have to start thinking of being altruistic and charitable as brothers and sisters. We have to start thinking about all of us as neighbors living together in the planet. And that's a very clear message to everyone. They are spending and wasting all our natural resources. And in order to change that, we have to start from our own house. And there are so many things we can change to help and save our natural resources for others. That includes, for example, reducing the amount of plastic, including plastic bags and bottled water consumption, especially because those products require an enormous amount of energy and resources to be produced, and they're not going to be easily degradable. Another thing we can do, manage our consumption of food, fruits, vegetables, any items. We stop throwing out food. Another important thing, every time you're using water, think about it. Think about where the water is coming from, how much energy, money, and time is spent to purify that water enough for you to have drinkable water in your place. Think about it every time you're wasting water. What about energy? How many times we leave the lights on and we're just concerned about $2 or $3 more in the end of the month in our bill? But that's not the problem. The problem is that in order to produce that energy, there are enormous amounts of resources being burned for us to have electricity in our homes. And that also includes heating and many other aspects of our daily life. So the message for us today is take care of our planet. Start in your own place. Start with the little things. Because if every one of us, all together, start taking care of what we have collectively as humanity on Earth, there's no doubt that, like Allan Kardec said in the Gospel According to Spiritism, Earth will produce and provide for all of us. Remember that. Thank you very much, my friends, and God bless us.
Dear listener, we are here talking about Spiritism in your life. Dr. Magalhães was telling us about the importance from the Spiritist perspective on learning this respect and collaboration with the other beings in our planet Earth. Now we're going to, as we still await a little longer to have here with us our dear guest Michael Team, because we're giving him a little more time since he's in Hawaii, which is 6 hours earlier than our time here at Kardec Radio. So while we wait for him, and it's worth waiting because he has a lot to share with us, we're going to listen right now a new segment, a new excerpt that is going to be in Yes, Spiritism for Youth and Children by the coordination of Bernadette Liao. She's going to talk about how to teach reincarnation to our children. How should we talk to them about it? We hope you enjoy it, and very soon we're going to bring to you Michael Team.
Welcome to our Yes, Youth Education in Spiritism with Kardec Radio. I am Bernadette Liao, and I'll be spending a few minutes with you, inspiring to bring spiritual awareness and spiritist teachings to our youth, parents, and educators. Today, we will answer 3 questions on helping your child to have a better understanding about reincarnation. First question. My teenager child always says that he did not ask to be born. What should I do about that? A very helpful thing you can do for your child is to understand what he's going through at his age. Teenagers live in an emotional roller coaster due to their hormones, trying to figure out who they are, their identity, as they become more independent. They want to be in control of their lives, but lack the maturity to handle stressful situations, coming back later to their parents for guidance when they feel lost or in need of protection. Therefore, learning about your child's age development or taking some parenting classes is very helpful. You and your child will benefit greatly from that. This current teenagers generation is very different from the time when we, adults, were growing up. So, not only is it beneficial to learn about the psychological, emotional, cognitive, and social development of your child, but also to become familiar with the type of pressure and issues that he faces nowadays in order to better help him. When your child says, I do not ask to be born, it means that he is frustrated and he does not want to take responsibility for his actions, blaming you, parent, for what is going on in his life. He is trying to justify his behavior by putting the problem in someone else's hands, as if he was saying to you, it is not my fault, but yours. Most teenagers have a strong conflict inside because even though they want to be independent and show that they have grown up, they avoid embracing an important part of maturing, which is to take responsibility for their own actions. So try not to be upset or mad when you hear your child saying that he didn't ask to be born. Often it is not personal. A positive approach of handling this situation lies in acknowledging your child's feelings by calmly saying, I understand that you feel this way because you are upset and frustrated. I see it right now, but I do think differently. Do not try to teach him the spiritual explanation why he was born in such family. He probably will not listen. This is not the right time. His spirit needs to be open to listen about the spiritual matters. So, do not engage in any discussion that may trigger an argument. And we definitely encourage you to pray. Prayer is a powerful tool that can amazingly calm people's hearts and raise confidence in your parental skills. After all, God trusts your parenting potential. Second question. How can I explain to my child about his past life connections with the members of his family? Well, before you start talking about why your child was born in such family and how he asked to be born, conscious or unconsciously, why in the spiritual realm, it is important to give him the foundation, which means talk to him about reincarnation. After that, you can talk about family ties. Chapter 14 of the Gospel According to Spiritism has great teachings about this topic. One easy way to introduce the concept of reincarnation to a child or teenager is through stories. Do not initiate the conversation with the definition of reincarnation and how it works. This is not a very effective way to use it with our young ones. The goal is to help your child to see the reason behind the concept of reincarnation. Help him to come to the conclusion of its purpose instead of us just telling them. Stories are wonderful tools to illustrate examples and help to achieve that goal. Start with a simple story. You may create your own, or you may find one story from my Spiritus book or online text. The story may be sad, but it is important that your child relates to it and that it touches his heart. Here's an example of a story we created. Mike was a boy who had an older brother named Sam. Mike was very jealous of his brother because he wanted all his parents' attention and did not like to share his room with him. In his mind, he wished he was the only child. One day, Mike and his brother got into a big fight. Mike got very angry and pushed his older brother against the wall. Sam fell, hitting his head on the concrete floor, and had a fatal accident, dying. Mike could not believe what happened, and he felt horrible knowing that he had caused that sad accident. He cried because deep in his heart he did not want his brother to die. Mike realized he loved his older brother, even though they fought once in a while and he was mean to him. But Mike thought it was too late now. There was nothing he could do as his brother no longer was alive. In his heart, all he wanted was another chance, and he prayed to God for an opportunity to say to his brother he loved him and that he was sorry. He wished that somehow he could make it up to his older brother. Third question. How can this story help my child to understand about reincarnation? We are using here the cognitive bottom-up learning process. This story builds the foundation to support the teaching of a more elaborated topic, which is reincarnation. It helps the child to connect with the character, his problem, and empathize with him as you ask the following questions. How would you feel if you were in Mike's shoes? Would you like to have another chance? Is there a way that Mike could make it up to his brother who no longer lives in the physical world? If you have noticed, in any moment we mention the word reincarnation in the story, because we want the child first to reflect a little bit about what happened, and then slowly, through a logic sequence of questions and answers, lead the child to think about ways which would be possible for Mike to be with his brother again and make it up to him. When you feel the child is ready, introduce the solution for the problem mentioned in reincarnation and explain it in a simple way relating to the story. The word and the concept of reincarnation come up only at the end, after the child reflects upon it. Then connect it to God's love and His justice in allowing us to reincarnate. This simple and short story has wonderful lessons in which you can explore not only the topic of reincarnation, but the immortality of the soul, forgiveness, and how our poor actions and choices can have serious consequences as well. Kardec Radio listeners, let's teach our children the blessings of reincarnation. Questions 171 of the Spirit's Book by Allan Kardec explains that reincarnation is the justness of God and revelation, and that a loving parent always leaves the door of forgiveness open to strange children. Yes, we are all God's children, and therefore God does not punish us, but gives us the opportunity to correct our wrongdoing and learn from many corporeal existences. Thanks for listening to Yes, and if you have any question, please email us to kardec@kardecradio.com.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
The International Spiritist Council is organizing and promoting the 7th World Spiritist Congress, which will be held in Havana, Cuba on March 23rd through the 25th of 2013. The Congress theme will be Charity and Spiritual Education in Building a World of Peace. 150 years of the Gospel according to Spiritism. For more information, please visit www.7cem.org.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday live, Evolution in Two Worlds, a journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
A new great book and tool for kids and educators. The children's book, Our Father by the Spirit May May, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is available for purchase at www.edisayofamerica.com. Buy your copy today.
And now we return to our program.
Finally, dear listener, we are here with Michael Tim. We are so honored because he has a lot to share with us. Michael Tim is a retired insurance company claims manager and a semi-retired journalist living in Kailua, Hawaii. He is the author of 5 books, 1 on distance running and 4 dealing with spiritual matters, including life after death. The 2 most recent being Transcending the Titanic and The Afterlife Explorers. He is a regular contributor to Atlantis Rising magazine and 2 national athletic magazines. He is the editor of the Journal of Spirituality and Paranormal Studies and The Searchlight. Mike serves as vice president of the Academy of Spirit and Consciousness Studies and writes a twice-monthly blog on spirituality at whitecrowbooks.com. Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for being with us at Kardec Radio today.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Vanessa.
You know, it's amazing. People kept asking me, but Vanessa, what is this about the Titanic? It's been 100 years, and are we Hollywood now? And I said, no, it's deeper than that. Of course, we're not creating sensation here. We're reflecting on the most important issues and the fact that the Titanic also provides to us evidence about the afterlife. So when you got interested in reflecting on the issues of the afterlife, how did that happen, Mike?
It just sort of evolved over a number of years. I grew up as a Catholic and left the church about age 30 or so, and somewhere around age 50 I decided I needed to have some sort of belief system, and I came upon Edgar Cayce material and started reading Edgar Cayce, and that led to other books on reincarnation, and then to near-death experiences, and then into mediumship, and it just all sort of came together over time.
So that's quite interesting. So it became like an inner reflection. And then how did you go from there to being so productive nowadays into these reflections, the books, the blogs, the magazine on the matters of the life beyond earthly matters?
Yeah, well, I majored in journalism in college. I never really was a full-time journalist. When I got out of college in 1958, newspapers were shutting down right and left, and there just wasn't that much opportunity in journalism, so I ended up in the insurance business, but I still enjoyed writing and did a lot of freelance writing, especially for sports magazines, and in particular running magazines, Runner's World and Running Times and so forth. So I had a lot of experience writing, and then when I retired from the insurance business in 2002, I turned it all to the metaphysical and spiritual area. And you'll have to pardon me if I'm speaking with a frog in my voice. I just got back from the mainland, and I caught a cold on the plane, and I've been coughing my head off. I just hope I don't break into a coughing spell here while we're talking.
Don't worry, because if you do, we're going to bless you all the time.
Okay. Thank you.
But thank you so much for being with us at Kardec Radio today. I know we are 6 hours away, and it's amazing. And we thank you so much for being with us and making the effort to sharing so much. I have a question especially about the Titanic, because I really love the way you write, because it really takes the reader into the book in such an amazing way. And the way you compile and you reflect, your introduction is fascinating, because it begins with the reflection that the Titanic isn't the greatest disaster that ever happened in that regard. There were others like the Santana, right?
You're right.
And as you entitled the introduction, Understanding Our Fascination with the Titanic, can you share with the listener about why we're so fascinated about the Titanic?
Yeah, as you point out, there have been other ship disasters. There was the Santana, which had about a few more people killed than on the Titanic, and nobody's ever heard of the Santana, or maybe it was a Sultana. I forget now what the name of it was. And then there was a ship in the Philippines not too long ago that there were more than 4,000 people killed on that. The La Paz, I think it was, but Donna Paz was the name of it. And yeah, and nobody's heard of that. So why the Titanic? And I think, it's the fact that there's just so much emotion and mindset, virtue, and vice that have been depicted in the first stories about it. There's love and fear, hope and despair, bravery and cowardice, arrogance and humbleness, pomp and shame, selfishness and brotherhood, and these all came out in the initial stories and have been recycled over and over again over the years. There's been a number of movies, 4 or 5 movies in English and a number in foreign languages and a number of books, and so this emotion comes out, and I think that's the reason why it's so popular. The Titanic is sort of a microcosm of life. It was a community isolated in the vast reaches of the ocean, and offering both wealth and poverty, and had the opulence of first class and the ordinariness of steerage class, with a sort of a middle or second class in between. So there's a little community in the ocean.
Exactly. It represents probably what happens in our everyday lives, and I love the way you contextualize the Titanic, historically speaking, talking about a time in which, at the beginning of the 20th century, humanity on the earth was so proud of the scientific advancements and so distanced from the other aspects of life that go beyond our, apparent powerfulness. And then the unsinkable Titanic, as you say, demonstrated the inadequacy of the science alternative. And you quote from Harper when he said that there remained only what a majority view as unworkable, the need for mankind to live the Christian ideal. I mean, contextualizing it from the perspective that it's a lesson for all of us on life and death.
I definitely think so, and as I try to discuss in the first chapter, I mean, I was fascinated in reading the various stories of how people face death. That's what my first chapter is all about, and I classified them as in 4 different categories. There were those who faced death with dignified expectation. They believed in spirit. They believed it wasn't the end for them, and they went heroically to their deaths. Then there's what I'd call stoic resignation. These people may not have had any real belief system, but they still stoically went to their deaths. Mm-hmm. The third one is sort of an overlap with the second one, controlled trembling. They were scared to death, but they didn't let their fear affect other people. And in the fourth category, there was what I call uncontrolled trembling or panic. I mean, these people were just so fearful that they were screaming and yelling and affecting other people on the ship. So I find that part of it fascinating, how people face death, and I think that carries over to how we face the rest of us face death.
Exactly. It's incredible, the stories you wrapped up about a few people, as you're saying, on how they faced it, how they dealt with that desperation. And there are so many fascinating stories. And you're talking about people who also could foresee that their time was going to come. It's our other chapter about the premonitions and how often it comes. And you talk specifically throughout the book, one of the main characters you describe, Mr. William T. Stead, right?
Right. The book is more about Stead, or actually, I think his name is really pronounced Steed.
Okay.
It's spelled S-T-E-A-D, but my understanding is that the correct pronunciation is Steed. He was a British journalist and a spiritualist, and he'd written a couple of novels well before the Titanic disaster in 1912. One of them was about a ship called the Majestic, captained by Edward J. Smith, who just happened to be the captain of the Titanic, and the Majestic was owned by White Star Line, and it ended up hitting an iceberg, the Majestic didn't hit an iceberg, another ship hit an iceberg, and the Majestic went to the rescue of the ship because there was a psychic aboard the Majestic that told the captain about the ship sinking some distance away, and so they went and saved some people. But there was a number of similarities in the fact that the captain of the ship, and it was the same name as the captain of the Titanic, is really amazing, and that it was owned by White Star Line. This was in 1892 that he wrote it, which was 20 years before the Titanic. And then even before that, in 1886, he wrote about the sinking of an ocean liner and how lives were lost because there were too few lifeboats on it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and he gave talk in 1909, 3 years before the Titanic sank. He gave a talk to a group and said, imagine, if you will, that the Atlantic Ocean is our graveyard. I mean, why would anyone say that? He didn't consciously foresee his death on the Titanic, but it appears that there were subconscious things going on there that surfaced. And even before he left on the voyage to the United States, he was on his way to Carnegie Hall in New York to give a talk on world peace. And he told his secretary, he says, something's going to happen. I don't know what, but I just feel very uneasy. So there are things, and a number of other people had premonitions. And, of course, one of the more famous story is that by Morgan Robertson, who was also an author. He wrote a book in 1898, which was 14 years before the Titanic, about a ship called the Titan, said to be unsinkable, carried too few lifeboats, and during its first voyage in April hit an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sank. So, I mean, that had even more similarities. So whether Morgan Robertson was able to see into the future or not is speculative, but there are a lot of things going on with as far as premonitions of disaster, not only with the Titanic but with other disasters. There's an interesting book out now by Bonnie McErney, I guess it is called Messages, and she gathered a number of premonitions of people who were killed in the 9/11 attack from their spouses and friends and so forth. But that all these people seemed to know something was going to happen, but they couldn't quite put their finger on it. And, so that's
amazing. About the novelist Morgan Robertson, as I can, he wrote this book 1898. So, and right. It's entitled like Futility, and there's so many similarities. It's quite scary in the sense like it's truly like something that you can almost predict that people are going to walk that line and they're going to fall the way they did. So if I may, Mike, go one step back just to recap, as a listener is asking us to repeat, like, why did you get interested in going so deep about the issues of life and death, immortality, and spirit communications related to the Titanic? Why?
Yeah, the stories had always fascinated me, and then I, as you mentioned in the introduction, I do quite a bit of writing for Atlantis Rising magazine, and knowing that the 100th anniversary of the Titanic was coming up April 15th, I asked the editor if he'd like me to write a story about William Stead. This was, in last October, and he said sure. So as I began writing the article about Stead and researching the material, I realized I have much more than an article here. I've got a book. If I put it all together. So it was only 5 months before the 100th anniversary. I just gathered it all together and cranked out a book in a month or so, and so that's how that book came about. It's the 100th anniversary has come and gone, and the interest in it seems to have died out. But I don't think the interest in the Titanic is ever going to really completely die out.
Yeah, because there is a strong message behind it, as you mentioned. I mean, we were talking at the beginning of the program, as we did the introduction, quoting Kardec when he asked that question about the fear of death. And here, as you just mentioned and you talked about it in the book, the fact that people didn't believe the ship could sink. That illusion of the permanence of life and discarding how fragile and impermanent things are, and not being cautious enough to really create a safe environment because people feel death is going to happen somewhere else but here. So it seems that the message of the Titanic is much deeper than we ever imagined.
Definitely.
Right?
Yes.
And especially we want to talk about how also you brought in the many scientists and scholars of the 18th and 19th centuries and how they talk about the afterlife in also one of your other books, and then the whole history about the dialogue, the beautiful dialogue of a doctor and William Stead in the afterlife and the rescue work of other entities. But we're going to give a short break, Tim, and we'll be right back with you, okay?
Okay.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
A new great book and tool for kids and educators. The children's book, Our Father by the Spirit May, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is available for purchase at www.edisayofamerica.com. Buy your copy today.
Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
The newest edition of the Medium's book by Allan Kardec is now available. Purchase your copy online or via your ebook reader. Simply go to www.edicofamerica.com today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday live. Evolution in Two Worlds. A journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Spiritism for Everyone, the online study of the Spirit's Book and the Gospel according to Spiritism. Spiritism for Everyone meets every Wednesday evening and Saturday morning using the latest technology in web conferencing. You can join in from any computer in the comfort of your home or office, no matter where you are in the U.S. or the world. Spiritism for Everyone is open, free, and requires no registration. To access the web live meetings, go to www.spiritus.us. Spiritism for Everyone is a program of the United States Spiritist Council.
And now we return to our program.
Yeah, dear listener, it's quite fascinating, really, especially when Michael Thiem contextualizes the importance of understanding the Titanic from a different perspective. It's as if we could say, revisiting life and death from the eyes of the Titanic. Michael Thiem is here with us directly from Hawaii, and he is the author of the book Transcending the Titanic. It's great literature, and he brings together lots of information, not only about the sinking, but about what happened afterwards. Not only during, before the premonitions, but after, and especially through the eyes of William T. Stead, a distinguished British journalist, who was a victim of the Titanic and continued to communicate after his death. After chapter 5, especially chapters 5 and 6, we have beautiful understanding about William Stead coming from the dead, as we say, and talking to us, especially when he talked to Dr. Carl Wickland, a psychiatrist who is specialized in helping spirits as we say in Spiritism, this obsession, doing the rescue work. And Dr. Carl Wickland became very renowned because of his book as well, 30 Years Among the Dead. And in this chapter, Michael Team reports the whole dialogue, at least a very interesting dialogue between William Stead and Dr. Wickland, helping a spirit that also was a passenger at the Titanic, John Jacob Astor, first-class passenger who was believed to be the richest man in the world at the time, and he was in need of being rescued spiritually. So, Michael, can you tell us more about William Stead, how different he was, more evolved soul, as we say, and then he participated in the rescue work in the beyond of people such as this richest man, Jacob Astor.
Right. Well, to begin with, William Stead, or Steed, however you want to pronounce it, was when upon his return to England from the United States, he was planning to accompany a direct voice medium whose name was Etta Wright, or Reet, however you pronounce her name, W-R-I-E-D-T. She was a very gifted, as I said, direct voice medium, and she was waiting in New York for him and was going to accompany him back, but needless to say, after she heard about it, she decided she wasn't going to go to England, but then others talked her into going. But Steed started coming through her, delivering messages through her, through other people. He communicated with Dr. John King, who was the president of the Canadian Psychical Research Society. He communicated through a half a dozen different people in England, and after Mrs. Wright got over there, he began communicating with other people. And one of the things he said, which is on the back cover of my book, he explained the scene there. He said, "A matter of a few minutes in time only, and here were hundreds of bodies floating in the water, dead, hundreds of souls carried through the air alive, very much alive somewhere. Many, realizing their death had come, were enraged at their own powerlessness to save their valuables. They fought to save what they had on earth, prized so much." So, a lot of them didn't really realize that they were dead, and more concerned about their jewelry and so forth, and what was coming next.
Quite amazing. So he was a different soul, because in other parts of the book, it was reported from other survivors of the Titanic that William Stead was really different. He was quite peaceful, facing, as you said, stoic resignation.
Right.
Is that right? Is that correct?
There are about 4 people who were interviewed, 4 people who survived, and one was the cabin steward and a couple of others who observed Stead, and they said he was very calm. They saw him at different places. At one place, he was helping people board the lifeboats, and I guess after he did what he could there, somebody was running through the library, the smoking room, and they saw him sitting there reading what may have been a Bible. Not sure what he was reading, but he was reading a book and seemed very calm. And then another person reported, as the ship was going down, she was on the last lifeboat, and she looked and saw him, and he was appeared very calm. There's a very, very interesting story told by Colonel Archie Gracie, who was one of the survivors, and I thought that it might have been William Steed that he was referring to, but it wasn't. I don't think it was. He survived. He came up. He went as the ship went down. Colonel Gracie somehow survived. He got pulled down in the suction, but he still came up. He had a life vest on, and I guess that helped him surface more quickly. And he climbed aboard an overturned lifeboat that held about 20 people. And once it was completely loaded, no more room for people. There were other swimmers coming up and trying to get aboard, and those aboard were kicking them off and pushing them away and so forth. So I guess it was really a terrible situation. But Gracie recalled this one swimmer who swam up, and he said, "Boys, any more room?" And somebody yelled, "No, go away, we don't have any more room." So this swimmer said, Okay, boys, good luck and God bless you. And he swam away. And I thought that might have been Steed, but I don't think so. After doing the research on it, I think that was Robert Bateman, he was both a medical doctor and a minister. He had been to England to in some sort of revival meeting, and his body was found about 3 weeks later floating in the Atlantic. But what the description pretty much fits Robert Bateman. But so my heroes are both Bateman and Steed, the way they face death.
And you know, one of the fascinating parts of your book as well is the dialogue you report between Dr. Wickland and John Jacob Astor, who was one of the passengers and brought in to the rescue by the very William T. Stead. And it's quite interesting because as they are doing this rescue work, as in Spiritism we call it this obsession, and you have a beautiful definition here, a quote that, you know, it's a way to create, you know, to rescue these earthbound spirits that are here stuck. And it's interesting because one of the parts of the dialogue says that Dr. Wickland mentioned to John Jacob Astor, when a person leaves for self alone, he usually finds himself in darkness when he passes over to the other side of life. You must obtain understanding of the glories of the spirit world and realize a life there is service to others. That is the true heaven. It is a condition of mind. And then John Jacob Astor replies, why are not these things taught in the world? And then Dr. Wickland replies, will the world listen? Humanity as a whole does not look for the spiritual side of life, but looks for other things. The world is seeking an amusement for selfish gain, not for truth. These excerpts of the dialogue are really enriching and quite amazing. And I wonder how the impact of this report in 1924 was for our society in Chicago, in the United States. Do you have any report on how that book by Dr. Wickland, 30 Years Among the Dead, impacted our society here, if any?
Yeah, I think mainstream, Dr. Wickland was a psychiatrist, but I think mainstream psychiatry thought he was crazy and you know, didn't accept anything he had to say, where, you know, a few people thought he was onto something, but and there's still, you know, it's still a classic in the field. And you know, Dr. Wickland's book, he has 2 books, and they're still classics and very interesting. And the whole message in them is that many spirits are earthbound, don't even realize that they're dead, and they have to be awakened to the fact that they have, quote, died, and need to go into the light or whatever it is that you know, awakens them. And that's the whole message that comes through in Wickland's book. And as far as John Jacob Astor, I think it was like 3 years, I forget exactly how many years, like 1915 or 1916, that William Steed supposedly brought John Jacob Astor to the seance room. Mrs. Wickland, Dr. Wickland's wife, was a trance medium, and these spirits would possess her and talk through her, and that's how the conversation went on between John Jacob Astor, who still didn't realize he had died some 3 years later, and Wickland told him what had happened, and I guess that sort of helped John Jacob Astor realize, you know, that he had died, and then he went on from there.
Wow. And it's fascinating because in this report about, you know, the spiritual laws of life, as we may say, and quoting a passage in your book at the very beginning about another passenger, another millionaire, the magnate Benjamin Guggenheim, who asked John Johnson, his room steward, to give his wife a message. And he asked him to say, and he did because he survived, right? Saying, tell her that I played the game straight and no woman was left on board the ship because Benjamin Guggenheim was a coward. Tell her that my last thoughts were of her and the girls. It's quite amazing because it makes us ponder much more deeply about what we're doing here. And talking about that, you have recently written a book entitled The Afterlife Explorers, which talks about a number of scholars and scientists from the 18th and 19th centuries. And in these books, you talk about all the research. And is there any chance that some of this research is outdated? And how could we tell it's up to date, or what is happening currently that either complements or contradicts?
Yeah, my purpose in writing, actually all four, how many books? Five books I have now on the afterlife, focus on the old researchers, and that's primarily because I feel that their work was never appreciated, and it pretty much came to an end around 1930. There hasn't been that much research in mediumship since 1930. Dr. Gary Schwartz did a little, a few years ago, back in the late 1990s and early 2000s, but there has been no research that equals, what was done in the late 19th century and early 20th century. And as I said, it just wasn't appreciated, and I can understand why it wasn't appreciated. It's very hard to grasp. I had to it took me about 3 or 4 years to really begin to understand what was happening, or why it was so difficult for the researchers to interpret what was coming through. And so that's been my focus, trying to put the work of these researchers into language that the average person can understand without having to really delve into the books 3 or 4 times as I did.
Yeah, it's like about the context of the time, right?
Right.
Exactly. And it's about, for example, yesterday we were watching a DVD that somebody from Brazil sent us about a recent movie named The Movie of the Spirits. And at the beginning of the movie, they talk about the Second World War and how it impacted on many of the accounts and the reports on the afterlife, and especially Spiritism, and how it was put down and people were persecuted. So one of the reasons why everything that was happening apparently disappeared for a while and then gained new force in Brazil, and now it's back, resurging everywhere, including the United States. So do you think that the current times are more open to that type of discussion?
People tell me that, but I'm not sure. I mean, I still see materialism and hedonism prevailing as much as it did 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, I really question whether we're on a spiritual path. I mean, there are in a number of cases a number of people who are, but overall, I just feel that we're more materialistic than ever and more hedonistic than ever. And going back to these early researchers, it all seems to have started with the Age of Reason back in the 17th and 18th centuries. The Age of Reason put the educated people on guard against religious teachings and actually made them rebel against religious teachings. And then Darwin's theory of evolution came out in 1859, and that really was the death blow for religion. And no self-respecting, quote, educated man, would believe in spirits. And from about 1860 to 1882, when the Society for Psychical Research was formed, I mean, it was people had despaired. William James called it soul sickness. They had pretty much concluded that there is no life after death, that we're just here, we live and then we die, and that's it, we're extinct. And so the Society for Psychical Research it was formed in 1882, even though there were earlier researchers like John Edmonds and Robert Hare and Allan Kardec. It really wasn't formulated into an organization until 1882, and gradually, we started fighting back, getting information, evidence that the soul does survive death. Again, as I said, in 1930, it sort of came to an end because there was so much fraud going on. The Society for Psychical Research just threw up their hands and said, we're just reinventing the wheel. We're not going to get anything more out of this, and that sort of ended it all. But again, then we went to past life studies in the 1950s and 60s, and near-death experiences in the 70s and 80s, and right up to the present time. So that all has added up. Whether it's making it, surely there are, converts, people who believe in it, but mainstream society, I think, is still stuck in religious fundamentalism and scientific fundamentalism. I think there, 60% of the population in the United States, at least, is stuck on religious fundamentalism, and 30% on scientific fundamentalism, and a very small percentage that really accept this kind of thing that we're talking about.
It's amazing, huh? It's amazing that, as somebody says, little science, just a little bit of science actually makes us not believe in anything. But if we get more science, it's inevitable. We're going to get there, right?
Right.
So, Mike, we're going to give a short break, and when we come back, we want to ask you more about Kardec, your take on it, and also on your perspective on mediumship and the way you reframe it for the current times.
Okay.
All right?
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live, every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
A new great book and tool for kids and educators. The children's book, Our Father by the Spirit May, psychographed by Chico Xavier, is available for purchase at www.edisayofamerica.com. Buy your copy today.
Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
The newest edition of the Medium's Book by Allan Kardec is now available. Purchase your copy online or via your ebook reader. Simply go to www.edicayofamerica.com today.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday live. Evolution in Two Worlds. A journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Spiritism for Everyone, the online study of the Spirit's Book and the Gospel according to Spiritism. Spiritism for Everyone meets every Wednesday evening and Saturday morning using the latest technology in web conferencing. You can join in from any computer in the comfort of your home or office, no matter where you are in the U.S. or the world. Spiritism for Everyone is open, free, and requires no registration. To access the web live meetings, go to www.spiritus.us. Spiritism for Everyone is a program of the United States Spiritist Council.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, we're here enjoying a new perspective on the Titanic. It's about transcending the Titanic. Our dear Michael Team is here with us directly from Hawaii, and he's sharing his take on it. It's deeper than we imagined because the Titanic is a true message about life and death to humanity. It came right before the First World War. And then, we have had successive waves of awakening moments, deep awakening moments for humanity. Have we awakened yet for the reality of life? It seems we're evolving, but still very slowly, right, Tim? You're talking about how slow it still is, though it feels like the humanity is opening more doors for this type of consideration regards to mediumship and the afterlife. So in your book, the last chapter talks about mediumship and the then and now. Can you tell us more about, since the Fox sisters and to current times, including Kardec, how you see it?
Yeah, I think the mediumship of, from 1850 up until, the early 1900s was much more dynamic than it is now. I mean, today's mediumship is primarily clairvoyance and clairaudience. I mean, you don't hear much about physical mediums. There are a couple of physical mediums, David Thompson in Australia and Stuart Alexander in England and a couple of mediums in France and so forth that we hear about now and then, but not to the extent that, in the old times. You don't hear of the trans mediums like Leonora Piper or Gladys Osborne Leonard, at least being studied. And I think one of the reasons why and the direct voice, I think the direct voice is the most evidential type of mediumship, where the voice of the individual is actually coming through separate from the medium herself, through a cone or whatever it is floating in the air. We just don't hear much about the direct voice anymore, and the reason I think is because all this happened before mass communications, before radio, before television, before computers. People had a lot of time to sit around in their homes and to think. There was a lot of quiet time. They had social time. They'd go out and sit in circles and so forth, and they would develop this mediumship either at home or in the group. Today people are just so busy on watching television or playing on their computers that people who have the ability just never come to recognize it. So I think that's the problem today. But at the same time, I think there's another reason. I think the spirit world sort of threw up their hands in despair. There were indications through Kardec and William Stainton Moses and a number of others that this was a concerted effort back at the time of the Fox sisters to help the world realize that there is life after death. As I mentioned before, I mean, the world had turned to become very materialistic and so forth, and there was some need for assurance. And Benjamin Franklin and Emanuel Swedenborg were supposed to be the leaders on the other side, trying to communicate with the world and let the world know that there is a spirit world. But this went on for 80 years, and it reached a point where you can't help wonder whether they just said, well, we've given it to you over and over again. I mean, how many times do we have to give it to you? And obviously not accepting it. So I think they just the leaders on the other side who were responsible for this just sort of threw up their arms in despair and said, we've given you as much as we can, and obviously you're not accepting it, and they went away. I mean, there's still other spirits trying to come through, but
Mike, I want to share with you that as you're saying, you talked about Benjamin Franklin. They have been bringing messages, and I think mostly in spiritist circles, because the Spirit Side of Baltimore has Benjamin Franklin as one of its main mentors. And recently, we were in Atlanta at the National Spiritist meeting, the symposium, and we saw there not only main founding fathers such as Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, we saw also Abraham Lincoln and others, but also the founding mothers from Abigail Adams to others. And they are pretty active, and you're right. I think you're right, because they are active towards those who are open. And I think through the Spiritist movement, which is also quite open, they have been coming through. The Spiritist magazine per se, we know, it came, the new edition in 2008 came about after a message from Benjamin Franklin in the Spiritist Side of Baltimore's meeting. And not only that, but we want to share with the public, as you're saying, probably the type of physical mediumship has changed. It's more like, for example, in Brazil, there are so many mediums of physical manifestations, but in regard to healing. There are so many healing mediums there that have been promoting. Like recently we were in Brazil. People talk often about John of God, but they have no idea whatsoever that Brazil has, like I would say, a collection of many healing mediums because of Spiritism. It really opens the doors for the proper environment, as you're mentioning. We need a proper environment and setting for people to get into that mindset. And recently there we were visiting one of other great healing mediums named João Barbel, and he sees like 3,000 to 5,000 people a time, by session, and it's like fascinating. It's John Berbel. He's in the countryside of the state of São Paulo, and not only him, we visited another medium in Minas Gerais, Magna, who receives the spirit of the spirit doctor is named Brother. I forgot the name now. Brother, what is that again? Gorick. Sorry, Brother Gorick. And I think the features, as you're saying, they're shifting to another time. And as you say in your book, it's more to a time in which that knowledge is giving a hand to medicine, especially psychiatry, because like in Brazil, the psychiatric hospitals have this collaboration with spiritist therapy and a high success rate in the recovery. And recently in the United States, we're seeing this shift in psychiatry because pharmacology is not enough. We thought for a while that neuropharmacology is going to do the deal with regard to mental illnesses, but not quite. And there's another element there that people are probably more prone to consider because, it's at least in England, the reports say physicians don't want to get into the psychiatry field anymore because they don't feel empowered to really, heal the patients. Mm-hmm. So do you think it's a plausible hypothesis in that regard, that maybe mediumship is geared towards this healing and these other features, not necessarily for the entertainment of the eyes of people?
I think so. I mean, it's very hard to measure, but you mentioned John of God. I just wanted to suggest to you that I have a friend here in Hawaii. He's a neurosurgeon, a brain surgeon, Dr. John Turner. He went down to study John of God about 6 months ago, and he had a number of ailments himself, and he seems to have come back completely cured of his ailments. And he's sold on John of God and the whole experience down there. At least the last time I talked to him a few weeks ago, he was, but I definitely think the healing thing is more prominent now than the evidence aspect of mediumship. At least in various parts of the world, but mediumship is on TV, like John Edward and Lisa Williams and so forth. That's reaching a number of people, but I don't think most of the people who see John Edward and Lisa Williams, they don't really understand the old mediumship, and it turns off as many people as it turns on. I mean, there are a lot of people I've talked to, and they say, "Well, how come you can't get a first name, you can't get a last name?" They just don't understand the difficulty the medium has in getting names. They assume that it should be like talking on the telephone, and they don't understand that the clairvoyant and clairaudient mediums are hearing things and seeing things that they're trying to interpret. So that they claim that they're cold reading, and unfortunately, they don't really explain that on these programs. Or at least I haven't heard them, John Edward or Lisa Williams or James Van Prague, give a good explanation as to why they can't get the names, what they're seeing, what they're trying to interpret. If they would only do that, I think they'd win more people over. But they're limited in time, and the producers put other limitations on them, and so gradually I think it's coming around, but not as fast as I'd like to see.
Yes, you're right. And as you beautifully state here in your book, you talk about mainstream medicine and science, the difficulties, but on the same token, how some researchers, physicians, psychologists, therapists in general are opening up, as you state in the book Spiritism and Mental Health by Emma Bragdon. She was recently here with us as well, and you quote from Dr. Alexander Moreira Almeida, and you talk about Kardec. So you talk about Kardec as one of the pioneering scholars in the studies of spirit communication and the implications of it. Do you think so many people, as you report in your book, Afterlife Explorers, they researched on spirit phenomena? Kardec was different because he not only researched, but he walked another step about the implications in society. What are your thoughts?
He was more of a philosopher than a researcher, I think. And one thing that the three big names in the initial research in the 1850s were Judge John Edmonds, who was in New York State Supreme Court, Professor Robert Hare, who was a retired chemistry professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and Alan Kardec. They didn't, you read their books and they don't really go that much into the evidential aspects of it. There are a few stories by Hare and by Edmonds, and Kardec hardly gives any stories of evidence. It's all teachings. I mean, it's obvious that the spirits who were communicating with them were trying to get through teachings. Well, they wanted to explain to them that, number one, we do survive death. Number two, it's not the horrific hell and humdrum heaven of religion, and that there are various planes, and that you've got to be prepared. You're going to go cross over as you are, and so forth. And they try to get these messages through. But then, gradually, as again in 1882, when the Society for Psychical Research was formed, it shifted from these teachings to, quote, evidence. And so you've got mediums who are bringing through teachings, you've got mediums who are bringing through evidence, and Kardec was more in the teaching aspect than the evidential part.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say then in that line of thought, talking about people who are still hesitant? So if they say, I want to live in the moment, I remember recently people telling, why do I care about knowing the afterlife? And they really don't concern themselves with life after death. What would you tell them?
Yeah, I agree with them that you should be living in the moment, but the best way to live in the moment is to live in eternity. And living in eternity means living in the past, present, and future all at the same time. And the example I give in one of my books, in The Afterlife Revealed, I think it was when we're working on the workforce, I mean, if you like your job, you're not really thinking about retirement on a day-to-day basis, but in the back of your mind, you're still thinking about retirement. And so the analogy there, comes across. I mean, you can live today, but in the back of your mind, it's going to, come to an end, and you're looking at retirement. I think William James, let me just quote William James here, who was one of the pioneering psychiatrists and researcher. He said, "The luster of the present hour is always borrowed from the background of possibility it goes with. Let our common experiences be enveloped in an eternal moral order. Let our suffering have an immortal significance. Let heaven smile upon the earth and deities pay their visits. Let faith and hope be the atmosphere which man breathes in, and his days pass by with zest. They stir with prospects. They thrill with remoter values. Place around them, on the contrary, the curdling cold and gloom and absence of all permanent meaning, which for pure naturalism and the popular science evolutionism of our time are all that is visible ultimately, and the thrill stops short or turns rather to an anxious trembling." So in effect what James was saying is, if you're going to be a non-believer, if you're going to assume that, after this life there's nothing, that you're extinct, it's going to affect your subconscious. You can put up a brave front, but it's going to affect the way you approach life.
Exactly. Michael, we are really, really appreciative of your efforts, and we are very happy today because we are sealing like a collaboration with you, and we hope I'm going to send you an email about asking you permission to publish the introduction of your book, Transcending the Titanic, in the Spiritist magazine, and other excerpts of the books you have, because I think they really contribute to what we're also looking for. It's good to know that you're there and you're helping us gain new awareness about life and the life continuing in the beyond.
Right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to try and get the word out. And if I could, say that my books are available at Amazon.com. Mm-hmm. And my last name is an unusual name. It's spelled Tymn. Yeah. Pronounced Tim, again, Tymn. If you put Michael Tim into a Google search or into an Amazon search, you'll find my books. But my grandfather came over from the Ukraine, and his name then was Tymczysyn, Tymczysyn. Oh. Nobody could pronounce it or spell it. So he was sitting in church one day. He saw the word hymn, Hymn. I mean, he says, "Oh, I think I'll just change the name to Tim to rhyme with him." And but the people still couldn't get it straight. It still comes out Timon or Time or whatever. But anyway, if anybody wants to find the books, they can just Google Michael Tim Tymn, and they'll find my books.
All right. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, I don't think so.
Thank you so much. It was our pleasure. We hope you have a blessed day, and we look forward to collaborating more often with you and having you at our programs and also at our events. Thank you so much, Mike.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Vanessa. I appreciate
All right. Thank you. So, dear listener, I hope you have enjoyed, because we did. What a very pleasurable soul that is here with us, recapitulating the much that has been in our, society about the afterlife, the great scholars, and mostly Kardec. Michael Tim, as he said, is the author of 5 books, and the most recent, The Afterlife Explorers. Today we talked mostly about Transcending the Titanic. We would recommend it. It talks about Kardec. It talks about great scholars, great minds that ever existed, and the beautiful teachings that the sinking of the Titanic brings to us. We are now going to wrap up the show by praying for the victims of the Titanic, for the lessons they left for us, and also for a dear Selene Shepherd, our dear friend from the Spirit side of Baltimore, who has helped much the Spiritist movement as one of the new waves of Americans who engaged in Spiritism, and she discarnated yesterday. Let us all now raise our thoughts and feel the soothing showers that we receive at this moment. No matter where we are on this planet, we ask you, dear God, we know you bless all of us, but you also count on us to co-create with you. May we share the best wishes of our hearts and our minds to all those who were in the Titanic, for the lessons of their lives shared with us, survivors and the victims, the thinking about our surrender to you, appreciating science but not above you, and cherishing our true religiousness by keeping our minds and our hearts open, not only to other beliefs, but to everyone we encounter. And today, may we all collectively send our deepest gratitude for Selene Shepherd, as she is received back in the spiritual realm by her family members, her spirit guides, and we thank her for always being this peaceful presence, this hard-working mother, wife, sister, daughter, and true friend of all of us, for her participation at Kardec Radio, as well as her beloved husband, Steve Shepherd. In her memory, we dedicate this program, thanking you, dear Lord, for the blessings of life. Dear listener, in a week as we come back, we are going to have here another collaborator of Spiritism in the United States of America, our dear friend and spiritualist, Tom Cratsley. He's going to be here with us talking about reincarnation, talking about a technique that was devised named restructuring. And one of his chapters in a book by Mrs. Taylor that was recently published. And we're going to talk about this and much more. And we await your participation in our anniversary on the 4th of July at 12 p.m. It's going to be a 3-hour show. We hope to see you there and to have you there as well. And we wish you many, many blessings.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.